Andrea's friendly smile was fading fast. "It's just," I stammered, knowing it was irrational to worry over something so inconsequential. It was a 2-ounce container of ranch dressing, for crying out loud. Andrea probably had a Costco-sized tub of it in her fridge. What really worried me, though, was that this was so unlike me. I never, ever made mistakes on my orders. And even though I knew there was no prestige in being a GrubGetter, I still took pride in my work. Showing up on time, double-checking orders, maintaining a positive attitude, even when suburbanites were chewing me out on their doorsteps. This attention to detail was why I had a perfect 5-star average rating. It was what made me a top grubber, with first dibs on the best shifts in the busiest areas of San Diego. So it wasn't just a forgotten condiment. It was a blemish on my otherwise flawless delivery record. And since driving for GrubGetter was the only thing I'd ever not failed at, my flawless delivery record meant a lot to me. "Everything okay?" A man's voice boomed from inside the house. It sounded vaguely familiar, probably because he was a repeat customer. I didn't remember ever coming to this address before, but that didn't mean anything. All the homes in these subdivisions looked the same. When he popped his head around the doorframe, though, I understood exactly why his voice was so familiar. I'd heard it twice a week for 12 weeks, droning on in a cavernous lecture hall for 2 hours at a time. I hadn't heard it since I was 21, and I had hoped I'd never hear it again. The voice belonged to Eddie Trammell, my old physics professor, the guy who'd inspired me to drop out of college. He looked a little different, slightly older, with a new paunch and some hints of gray around the temples, but he had the same scowl, always glaring like my very existence annoyed him. To see him standing on the threshold of this starter castle with a silk floral wreath hanging on the door was jarring in more ways than one. I'd always pictured him living alone in some sad, windowless apartment, eating cold beans directly from a can, not living it up in Encinitas with a hot, yoga-toned wife. "Hi," I said, because what else was there to say? The last time we'd seen each other, he'd told me I didn't have what it took to succeed in the pre-med program and that I'd never get into medical school. He'd called me coddled and entitled and acutely mediocre. I'd left his office in tears, then marched off campus and never returned. At the time, I told myself I just needed to take a semester off to regroup and refocus, to give myself some space so I could find my true passion and pick a new major. I'd planned to return to school in a matter of months, ready to finish my degree with purpose and vigor. Of course, that never happened. Instead, I holed up in bed and played about 200 hours of trivia crack in the hopes of winning big, and when that didn't pan out, I signed up to be a GrubGetter. It wasn't supposed to be a full-time, long-term gig. But here I was, 4 years later, still delivering fried chicken for a living. College had now become this distant, fuzzy memory, something I'd tried to conquer and failed to finish. I didn't really like to think about it very often, or at all. In the moment, however, I couldn't simply brush aside those unwelcome thoughts and pretend the whole thing didn't happen, because Professor Trammell was right there in front of me, probably wondering how I ended up on his doorstep wearing a stained GrubGetter's polo shirt. Without thinking, I blurted out, "I'm sorry." Not that I owed him an apology. If anything, he owed me one. But the way he was looking at me right now made me feel guilty for merely taking up space. The line between his brows deepened, and he barked, "Is there something you need? I'm starving and this food is getting cold." I stammered, searching his face. And then I realized he had no idea who I was.